Welcome back, everyone. Today we're putting an absolute masterpiece of literature under the microscope in this explainer. We're taking a deep dive into Guy de Maupassant's classic short story, The Necklace. If you're fascinated by stories that explore the human condition, the invisible traps of social class, and the devastating consequences of pride, well, you are in the exact right place. We're going to unpack the themes, the characters, and of course, that iconic, totally unforgettable twist ending.
Okay, let's dive into this with a quote directly from the text that really just perfectly captures the essence of our story. Maupassant writes, "How singular is life, and how full of changes, how small a thing will ruin or save one." Just let that linger for a second. This right here is our hook. It sets the stage for a tragic sequence of events where a single, seemingly insignificant decision literally snowballs into a lifetime of consequences. Keep this thought right in the back of your mind as we trace the journey of our main character.
Let's start with part 1, Dreams of Wealth. Here we meet our protagonist, Mathilde Loisel. The text tells us she was born almost as if by an error of destiny into a family of clerks. She's pretty, she's young, but she is deeply and incessantly dissatisfied with her life.
Now, what's really interesting here is the sheer gap between what Matilda has and what she truly feels she deserves. Take a look at her reality. She's married to a petty clerk in the Board of Education. She lives in an apartment with shabby walls and worn chairs. When her husband sits down for dinner and happily uncovers a simple pot pie saying, "Oh, the good pot pie," Matilda is practically tortured by it. And why? Well, look at her desires. She feels she was born for all delicacies and luxuries. She dreams of elegant dinners, shining silver, and exquisite foods served in marvelous dishes. She doesn't just want these things. The lack of them physically and emotionally pains her. It's a gnawing, constant ache.
Which brings us to part 2, The Fateful Invitation. Every story needs a catalyst, and for Matilda, it arrives in a large envelope brought home by her absolutely elated husband.
When her husband presents this exclusive invitation to a grand party hosted by the Minister of Public Instruction, he fully expects her to be absolutely thrilled. I mean, it's a huge deal. It's an extremely select event that clerks rarely get invited to. But instead, we see this spiteful, bitter reaction. She just throws the printed card on the table, looking at him with an irritated eye. Why? Because she has no suitable dress to wear to such a high society affair. Her poor husband, who really just wanted to make her happy, is left completely silent and stupefied in dismay as she begins to weep. To solve this crisis, we hit a harsh financial reality: 400 francs. That's the exact amount Matilda calculates she needs for a suitable yet simple dress. And what makes this number so incredibly significant is that her husband literally turns pale when he hears it. You see, he had painstakingly saved this exact sum, 400 francs, to buy a gun so he could join some hunting parties the next summer. But, out of love and a sincere desire to see his wife happy, he sacrifices his own modest dream and just gives her the money.
But of course, a new dress isn't quite enough to satisfy her vanity. As the ball approaches, a totally new anxiety builds. She becomes sad and anxious all over again, telling her husband, "I am vexed not to have a jewel. I would prefer not to go to this party." And this is exactly where the fatal misstep happens. Her husband suggests borrowing jewelry from her wealthy schoolmate, Madame Forestier. So, Matilda visits her and is given access to a jewelry box, eventually discovering and borrowing a superb necklace of diamonds. Her hands literally tremble just taking it out. She's ecstatic, finally feeling like she truly belongs.
And so we arrive at part 3, The Lost Necklace. The night of the ball finally arrives, and for Matilda, it's an absolute triumph. She's the prettiest woman in the room, elegant, gracious, and smiling. She dances with enthusiasm, completely intoxicated by the pleasure and the widespread admiration of all the men in attendance. It's the absolute peak of her entire existence.
But man, that peak plunges into a terrifying valley almost instantly. Let's walk through the immediate aftermath to trace that breathless shift from joy to pure panic. They leave the ball at 4 a.m. Her husband drapes her in her everyday modest wraps, whose poverty painfully clashes with the elegance of her ball gown. Desperate not to be seen by the rich women in furs, she rushes out into the cold. They wander the streets of Paris, shivering, hopelessly searching for a carriage. Finally, they make it back to their dismal apartment. But when she takes off the wraps before the mirror for one final look at her glory, she utters a piercing cry. The diamond necklace is completely gone.
Now we enter part 4, 10 Years of Ruin. The Loisels are thrown into a cold panic. They retrace their steps, they go to the police, the cab offices, absolutely nothing.
So what do? Well, instead of simply admitting the loss to her wealthy friend, they take some desperate measures. They find a replacement necklace that looks exactly like the original. The price? 36,000 francs. That's an absolute fortune. To afford it, Monsieur Loisel borrows from users and moneylenders, taking on crushing debt and completely compromising the rest of his life.
Just tracking this decade of hardship really illustrates how her vanity cost them 10 years of their lives. Year 1, they dismiss their maid and move into a tiny attic. By year 3, Matilda, the woman who dreamt of shining silver and delicacies, now intimately knows the odious, brutal work of a kitchen. She washes the soiled linen, she scrubs the floors, breaking her nails. She hauls heavy buckets of water up the stairs, stopping at every single landing just to catch her breath. By year 6, she dresses like a commoner, loudly haggling at the butcher and grocer to save every single miserable sou. And all the way through year 10, her husband works his evenings and nights doing copying work for just 5 sous a page. This grueling, utterly exhausting existence lasts for 10 agonizing years, until the debt and all that exorbitant interest is finally paid off.
This brings us to the climax of our explainer. Part 5, the devastating truth. The debt is finally settled. One Sunday, taking a walk in the Champs-Élysées to rid herself of the cares of the week, Matilda spots a woman. It's Madame Forestier, and she's still young, still pretty, still attractive.
The stark contrast between who she was and who she's become really shows the immense physical cost of her pride. We see the radiant belle of the ball juxtaposed against the woman approaching Madame Forestier 10 years later. Matilda has become a strong, hard, crude woman of the poor household. Her hair is badly dressed, her skirts are awry, her hands are red from the harsh lie. Madame Forestier doesn't even recognize her. Matilda finally reveals her identity and, feeling proud that the debt is completely paid, confesses the whole story of the lost necklace and the replacement. The absolute gut-punch irony of the entire story lies right here. Matilda explains they've spent 10 years paying off the 36,000 francs for the diamond replacement. And then Madame Forestier, deeply touched, takes her hands and reveals the agonizing truth about the original borrowed necklace. Compare that monumental fortune they sacrificed with the actual paltry worth of the costume jewelry.
Oh, my poor Matilda. Mine were false. They were not worth over 500 francs. Just let that sink in. A decade of youth, beauty, and happiness traded for backbreaking labor and poverty, all for a piece of costume jewelry. It is, without a doubt, one of the most masterful and cruelest twists in all of literature. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to turn it over to you. What was the true cause of Matilda's ruin? Was it the rigid class structure of 19th century France that made her feel so absolutely worthless without wealth? Was it the loss of the necklace itself? Or was it her own unyielding vanity and pride that prevented her from simply telling her friend the truth? Which leads us directly to our final, lingering question, drawn straight from the source. Honesty is the best policy? What would have actually happened if she confessed right at the beginning? A single moment of uncomfortable honesty could have saved a lifetime of misery. It really challenges us to look at our own lives and the things we value. How small a thing will ruin or save one, indeed. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and keep pondering that final question until next time.